Gertrude Barrows Bennett, writing under the pseudonym of Frances Stevens, was an American writer. Born in 1884 in Minneapolis, the daughter of Charles Barrows, an American Civil War veteran, and Caroline Barrows. She initially wanted to become an illustrator, however was unable to do so and had to settle for the job of a stenographer, which provided her with a steady income until the end of her life, and allowing her to produce fiction. She married British journalist Stuart Bennett in 1909 and began writing stories for magazines like the Argosy and All Story Weekly. Stevens became the first major female author of modern fantasy and science fiction and died in San Francisco in 1948. The Heads of Cerberus was originally serialized in 1919 in The Thrill Book, a pulp magazine specializing in publishing unusual or unclassifiable stories. It was first reprinted in book form in 1952. The novel begins with a certain Mr. Drayton at his wit's end, making his premier attempt at breaking and entering. And by pure chance he tries to rob the temporary residence of his old friend Terry Trenmore. Drayton was forced into attempting burglary due to the machinations of a crooked corporation that framed him and his law practice due to the information he had acquired, managed to get him disbarred, and hounded him out of every job they could. In the end, Drayton decides to turn to burglary, resolving to stay alive even if he cannot stay alive as an honest person. Trenmore finds this coincidence very amusing and promises to help Drayton get back at the crooked company, and meanwhile shows him a glass vial topped with the tried heads of Cerberus filled with grey dust which he had acquired at an auction some time prior. The vial is described as a work of Benvenuto Cellini, carved for the Duke of Florence, and is said to contain the dust of purgatory. Following this auction, a certain person had tried to force this item out of Trenmore's hands for years, growing increasingly desperate in his methods. Now, as for this dust, once a person comes into contact with this dust in midair, he or she becomes suddenly transported into another dimension. This naturally happens to Drayton, Trenmore, and Trenmore's sister Viola, leaving Trenmore's poor butler utterly befuddled as to where everybody went all of a sudden. Drayton and co. find themselves in a grassy wilderness full of weird dancing figures under the light of a strange moon, which suddenly leaves a lot of them deposited in a futuristic dystopian Philadelphia in the year 2118. Soon it transpires this future nation is a dictatorship ruled by an oligarchy organized more or less along the lines of a social club. All the functionaries, who gain their names from their functions, seem bored out of their skulls whatever it is they do. The main characters, including a thief who wandered onto the house Trenmore was bumming at and got himself teleported into the future as well by accident, are only saved from execution by one of the female functionaries. However, her aim is solely to use them for her own political ends, seeing as those holding office must win the right to continue doing so in a very rigged public contest. And she is well aware that this time around she is not likely to get to keep her position, with all the negative connotations failure entails. This future Philadelphia is a supremely isolationist state, most of the population never having left so-called Penn State, and asking about it really seems to confuse the people in charge, as if why would they even want to ever do that in the first place? Even asking for a newspaper can make you be charged with treason because the information in it is a state secret only for the use of the members of the inner circle. It is an interesting example of an early dystopian work, despite not being as intensive as other examples in the field due to the inner circle having everything they do coated in a thick layer of boredom and disinterest. The scientific nonsense explanation at the end of the book to try and claim how none of this actually happened, claiming all the characters met in the future weren't real people but were the product of some kind of vague pseudo-timeless thought dimension nonsense, was wholly unnecessary and a bit rubbish. I advise you to just ignore the person giving this explanation and pretend they were in fact full of it, and then you'll have yourself an enjoyable reading experience without the author trying to basically make it not having counted in the last few pages of the book.